Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. I am your host, Blythe Brumleve, and I am happy to welcome in Ron Greene. He is the VP of Biz Development over at Overhaul, and we're going to be talking about the fascinating and frustrating aspects of the cargo crime world. So, Ron, welcome into the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thank you for the
Now,
invite.
for sure. And this is something that this is a topic that I love discussing. There is, shows on television that talk about, cross-border and things getting, stopped at the border from, cargo crime, I guess, perspective. But for folks who may not be familiar with, Overhaul or even you and your career, can you kind of give us that backstory of how you got involved in the world of cargo crime?
Yeah, happy to. I've been in the cargo risk management, or supply chain risk management is a term we use, for most of my career. I started out working in consulting in a consulting firm, building risk models around cargo theft issues for big Fortune 500 companies. What they can expect from a cargo theft standpoint if you analyze their global supply chain operations. Did that for many years and moved into more of a supplier or provider role with some companies that were actually deploying solutions to help mitigate cargo theft around the world. Today we work with the who's who of the pharma, high tech, food, alcohol, tobacco, and a variety of different industries that have cargo theft problems and do need to put programs in place to mitigate that risk and primarily prevent it from happening. But if it does happen, have systems in place to recover it.
That's interesting. You talk about like sort of the risk protocols of even just establishing that. How do you establish a risk protocol?
Cargo theft is predictable. It happens in the locations year over year the same. If you look
Oh,
at
wow.
heat maps or risk maps around cargo theft, they haven't changed in 20 years for the most part.
Really?
And
Huh.
in cargo theft tactics, we analyze what criminals are doing, how they're executing thefts, and put in mechanisms and tools and procedures to circumvent their operations. What it boils down to.
As,
Every region is different, and there's different tactics in North America versus Mexico versus Brazil versus Europe versus other parts of the world, and you have to adapt your solutions to what's happening on the ground from a real tactical level in a cargo theft standpoint.
and so when you're looking at what's happening, is it looking at just, sort of, I guess, crime reports or crime logs or maybe, in insurance incidences? How do you even know like where the heat maps are to create a heat map?
It's there is not good cargo theft reporting globally. Some
Hmm.
countries do it, some countries don't. Most of our intel comes from our network, law enforcement relationships. There's some reporting by governments, but it's really just being in the industry and being in the know.
Oh, wow. So it really is like it's almost like that. A lot of people are talking about, first party data. So it sounds like you guys are right there in it where the first party data can really affect the future shipments of your own goods.
Correct. Yeah, and we get very granular. We even study criminal crews. What are their tactics and where are they operating? And part of that comes from having a good relationship with law enforcement. They can share what they can. Part of that comes from just our own operations around the world and thwarting these attempts.
So let's give the listeners, I guess, sort of an overview of Overhaul. Is it security software? I have a general idea, but for folks
Mhm.
who may not be aware, is it an insurance policy? Is it software? Is it kind of both wrapped up? Who is, I guess, the target customer? All that good stuff.
It's really all of the above, but our core service is tracking and monitoring freight, providing visibility and a risk management, layer over the movement of freight. We specialize in transit cargo risk management. So things that are moving, whether it's on a truck, train, plane, or over the ocean. If cargo is moving, we have a risk management solution that we can apply to that to mitigate these issues. In most of our cases, in our customers' operations, we insert IoT devices in cargo
Hmm.
for real-time tracking and monitoring. We have control centers around the world. We call them GSOC operations, Global Security Operations Centers, where we track and monitor freight through software. It's our own proprietary software. And if something goes awry, if there's an event that happens that's not supposed to, whether the container doors open, trailer doors open, it stopped where it's not supposed to, it's off route. There's a variety of factors that we look at continuously. And then if something happens that's not supposed to, our system identifies it and we address it, through actions in our operation centers. It could be as simple as getting the driver moving where he's not supposed to be stopped, all the way to, calling in law enforcement and private security operations to recover cargo.
And so when is the customer essentially, is it a carrier or is it a shipper that wants to, protect maybe high valuable goods? Like who is, I guess, maybe installing the tracking devices and sort of the Internet of Things?
It's all the above.
Hmm.
We sell directly to shippers, the cargo owners, if you will. We
Mhm.
sell to carriers. We sell to freight brokers, intermediaries who, are contracted to move freight for shippers. So we kind of whoever's touching the freight has control over the freight. We sell into that group of people.
And so when after somebody, essentially becomes a customer, what does, I guess, the process look like of monitoring for a potential crime to occur?
Sure. So I'll give you just a couple use cases. We'll start with a over-the-road movement in North America. So at the point of origin, we're placing an IoT device inside that cargo as it's being loaded at the warehouse. We're also, collecting a lot of data on who the carrier is, who the driver is. Many cases, we take pictures of that truck and trailer for our own internal records. We're also connecting, to the telematics or ELD system in that truck through integrations. So we have multiple data points, on that truck, giving us live real-time data, what's happening with that vehicle as it moves from origin to destination. So as soon as that shipment is loaded in the truck, we're monitoring it in our control center through our software. It's kind of an automated process. Once
Hmm.
that data is captured, our control center automatically puts it in their queue for monitoring, and monitoring begins. Most of the monitoring activity is software driven,
Hmm.
so we don't really engage with the shipment or even frankly look at a shipment activity until something goes wrong. And at
And
that
so how
point,
do you, I was going to say, what are those early signs that it looks like, how do you know if like maybe the driver stopped off to use the restroom
mhm.
versus, okay, oh, there's something serious that might be happening here?
One of the rules of thumb in North America, specific to the U.S., is if we can get drivers not to stop for the first 200 miles from origin, 4 hours of driving, that decreases the risk of theft by 80 to 85%.
Oh, wow. Huh.
So that single activity, if we can get that driver just when he departs the origin warehouse to drive for 4 hours or 200 miles, um, before he or she takes a restroom break or a DOT break or stops for any other reason. So if we can, that's step one. Um, Step two, we're able to monitor is the shipment making logical progression towards destination? Is he on the right road? Is he or she on the right road? Is another alert that we could generate, meaning if the driver goes right instead of left or north versus south, we can immediately alert that and start to escalate that and investigate what's happening. Do we call the driver? Do we call his dispatch operations? All these different things come into play. In addition, we have the ability to detect if a door has been opened on a trailer or a container. So if something happens where the door gets open, we can immediately escalate that. That'd be a high risk alert where we're immediately making action to figure out what's happening. And if we don't get resolution, we can't figure it out. Nobody's answering our phone calls. We'll call on private security to investigate, or call on law enforcement to do a wellness check, or investigate what's happening with that truck and trailer.
So you're almost acting as like the track and trace department within a typical brokerage operation. Is that a safe assumption?
We're definitely much more granular in our analysis and what we
Mm.
alert to. Track and trace in brokerage operations typically, they're checking, has the truck departed, has it arrived. They're not looking at all the intermediary steps on what's transacting as that shipment progresses, from origin to destination. Um, and what's, another use case would be, an international move from Asia to Europe, where the IoT device is placed in the cargo at the point of manufacturing in the container. We're tracking it if it's an air shipment, we're tracking it to the airport. Then we'll track actually the flight through integrations as the cargo transits on an airplane, or we'll track through integrations as it transits the sea. Our IoT devices do require cell signal, so if it's out to sea, we don't have cell signal, but we can do through integration still track that shipment, all the way to destination. When it gets to the destination airport or port, we'll continue to pick up signal with our IoT device and continue to track and monitor that shipment all the way to destination. We alert on different security, alerts, whether it's off route, door open, stop where it's not supposed to. There's a variety of those. We also alert on integrity situations, whether it's temperature, humidity, shock. All these different factors can be integrated into the program. So if it's handled rough, it's out of temperature, there's too much humidity in the container or trailer, we can immediately escalate that and notify people and take action accordingly.
Now there was a quote that I was sent over from sort of the pre-show prep for this interview, and it was said that cargo theft continues to be a serious issue plaguing global shippers, and as thieves adjust their tactics and focus on high value goods, the need for additional security to protect in transit cargo is paramount. Now, you mentioned that there are different ways that North America handles a cargo crime sort of situation versus other countries. How is North America? I guess maybe is the safe answer, like is North America handling this well, or are there improvements that should be made relative to what the rest of the world is doing?
Definitely, cargo theft is at a all-time high in North America. People in the industry are saying cargo theft was one thing pre-COVID, post-COVID, it's a whole different animal.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of factors for that, both operationally and, at the society level. But cargo theft globally is just increasing, as supply chains expand, companies are moving manufacturing around the world, as well as as a general rule, crime is up globally, post pandemic, for one reason or another. We're seeing it across the board in North America. We're seeing it in Latin America, other parts of Central America. It is increasing, and other parts of the world, you deal with more aggressive criminals. Armed hijacking is a common tactic in parts of Mexico and Brazil, where you have different response protocols and to respond to that effectively.
Fascinating. And so when you had said something to the effect of, cargo crime has relatively, like, the tactics in the United States have been, am I quoting you correctly, that they've been kind of the same for the last 20 years?
The locations where it occurs has been the same for the last 20 years. There are cargo theft hotspots that have been relatively consistent year over year. You may have a flare up in a different city based on some criminal activity, but as a general rule, the hot spots where cargo crime occurs, has been relatively consistent. Now, tactics have changed. Criminals are getting more sophisticated. Even as in the last 12 months, they've kind of increased their level of sophistication. There's cargo criminals that are setting up trucking operations with the primary purpose to steal freight.
Oh, wow.
That's relatively new to the U.S. market, where they start a trucking company, they operate legitimately for a period of time, they build relationships across their business, and they get work into an operational level where they feel they can start skimming freight off their trucks. One of the more recent activities we're seeing is these criminal companies will, book a load through a broker, pick it up, take it to their warehouse, decide if they want it or not. If the truck has, say, 20 pallets on it, they'll take 4, they'll scan the BOL into a PDF editor, edit that PDF to now it says 16 pallets. They'll adjust the weight and all the different data points on that BOL, deliver it. The recipient, it receives the BOL. I have 16 pallets, all good. Mark it as delivered, and the driver drives off. Now that shortage may not get noticed for months. So people don't even know it's happening for months down the road, and they do an inventory, check in. They're realizing they're missing several pallets, and they have to do a whole new, backtracking to see where it went. Something went wrong.
Wow.
So that's relatively new to the U.S. You get to places like Brazil where it's the level of sophistication around cargo crime will boggle your mind, and how organized and sophisticated some of these criminal crews are in that part of the world. The same goes with Mexico, but you get into those parts of the world, it does get very violent, where there are violence as well as armed criminals are typically operating in that area.
What is an example, I guess, of a sophisticated cargo crime operation, say in Brazil?
So, organized criminal groups will invest in people. They will identify young, bright students who maybe not be financially well off. They'll pay for their schooling all the way through college education. They'll get a job, with a company, work there for many years up into middle management, and they'll come calling. Now it's time to pay their dues back. And through that insider information, they're able to get details of what's moving when, who's moving it, and execute thefts with insider information and those cargo criminal crews have up to 10 years invested in that individual.
Wow.
before they start using them as part of their network and part of their criminal operation.
I wonder why that's not going on in the U.S. I would any insight into that as to why maybe this
There's
is
a lot of
isolated?
social and economic reasons why. Part of it is cultural. Part of it is just rule of law. Part of it is just society's, the moral majority, of societies, but there's a lot of just cultural and socioeconomic factors that play into that.
Interesting. Now you had said, there are certain areas of the U.S. that have been impacted by cargo crime that are sort of the hot spots.
Yep.
What are some of those locations, and then what kind of freight is being targeted in those locations?
So cargo criminals go where the cargo is the most dense.
Hmm.
It is major port
So
operations.
L.A., Miami.
LA, Southern California has been the number one cargo theft hotspot for many, many years. Comparing states, California's been number one the last couple of years, but California and Texas would go back and forth who has the highest level of cargo theft year over year. Atlanta, Memphis, Nashville, Louisville, Chicago, Miami, New Jersey area. It's a combination of just, it's really based on where is cargo moving and where's it the most dense.
So the more cargo you have, like the more problems
Exactly.
that this is going to be something that you're going to
The
have
more
to combat.
the more opportunities they have to target specific facilities, target specific operations to steal. If you look back, 25 years in the cargo theft trends in the U.S., cargo theft really started to ramp up in the mid 90s. During the high tech boom. When everybody started getting personal PCs in their home and all the different electronics you have in your house today that are standard. If you go back to the 1990s, that really wasn't the case. In the 80s, people did not have how many different laptops you have in your house, how many different cell phones you have in your house. That was a completely different scenario. And what criminals realized during the ramp up of some of that high tech boom, they call it, is that very expensive goods were moving through unsecure supply chains, and they were ripe for the picking. To be able to capture and steal a multi-million-dollar load with very little to no security around it, and their tactics and have really continued to evolve and increase ever since then.
I think it was I was working at a freight brokerage about 10 years ago, and it was around the holidays, and we had a shipment of Xboxes
Yep.
that was stolen.
Yep.
And it was, we believe at the time, it was because of the driver, because the truck ended up, I mean, we had to file a police report, go through all this, it was very expensive shipment, obviously, that got stolen, but we ended up finding the truck abandoned on the side of the road.
Yep.
Got the full shipment, got everything back, but I imagine that that doesn't necessarily happen all too often here in the United States. Is that a safe assumption?
Very safe assumption. Cargo thieves are also they're known to steal a load of freight. If they get the wrong one, they don't want the product, they'll just leave it.
Hmm.
They're targeting something of certain value, and they get a load of paper products or something that doesn't have any black market appeal to them. A lot of times they'll abandon it. It's not worth their time and energy, and go back and get something else. The majority, if you look at the full truckload thefts in North America, the vast majority of them, if they're targeted, the criminal organizations will case facilities, case warehouses, maybe have some insider information, buy an informant, pay somebody for some information who actually works in that warehouse, be able to identify, when a load that they want is leaving that warehouse through surveillance and other means, follow that truck for several hundred miles in some cases, and wait for
Hmm.
that driver to stop at a truck stop or a yard, wait till that load is unattended, and within minutes they'll break in, hotwire that truck, and drive it off. In most cases, they'll have a second tractor or truck in the area. They'll swap out that tractor trailer, dispose of the stolen tractor down the road somewhere. In many cases, paint over the logos, change license plates on that trailer, so when they're driving back to their location, it's very inconspicuous to the law enforcement that that's a stolen truck, stolen trailer. So,
And you had mentioned earlier that one of the bigger ways to prevent a situation like this from happening is the driver not stopping for the first few hours of the shipment. Why is that?
that comes back to tactics. Cargo criminals when they target specific loads, historically they would only follow them for 50, 60 miles and give up and go back for a different one. And if we got the driver to drive 200 miles without stopping, the chances of that being stolen are much less. Today we have a few examples of criminal groups following the load several hundred miles, so they've adapted to that technique. But it's the rule of thumb for we call the red zone, driving through the red zone without stopping, still holds true for the most part today. It's a tactic we push hard for drivers to follow those rules to help prevent theft.
And so with it, a lot of the, I guess, the electronics are probably the first thing that I think of that are going to be the highly targeted, shipments. But is there maybe some other type of commodity or shipment that is really highly targeted that most folks that would be shocked to find out?
Electronics are definitely, one of the higher targeted commodities, but household goods, you know, alcohol, tobacco, cigarettes, pharmaceuticals, anything that can be stolen and resold, then there is a market appeal for it. The majority of cargo criminals have fences, so if they steal a load of, whether it be dish soap or some kind of food product, as soon as they have control of that product, they're calling their fences and say, "I got a load of this product. How much you want to give for me?" And they're shopping it around. Who am I going to sell this to? And they'll find the highest bidder, deliver that load to the highest bidder, and then in many cases they'll have that load unloaded in their fences warehouse. They'll take that trailer and just dump it somewhere, and they don't even want to mess with the trailer.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I guess for a lot of these cargo thieves, it almost sounds like, there's two facets that I'm thinking of as you were talking, is that all of this technology that's coming into supply chain and logistics, allowing for visibility, and additional tracking and things like that, load boards, which isn't new, but they've been around for forever. Are either of those two things subject to cybersecurity threats almost? And this might be out of, I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse or maybe, Overhaul's wheelhouse in general, but it almost like, as you were talking, it seems like, maybe putting a load of like electronics up on a public load board, that seems like that could be something that could easily be targeted by criminals.
100%. Load board
Okay, so I'm not off base in that
load
thinking.
board activity is a prime target for cargo criminals. You don't see the extreme high value loads on load boards because of that reason alone.
Hmm.
Companies who are shipping sensitive products, and are knowledgeable of cargo criminal activity will try to, through their brokerage operations, not have their loads posted on load boards for that specific reason.
And so that's more of a private thing that they're going to
Yeah,
reach out to their
yeah,
private carriers, people that they trust.
or only have a dedicated group of carriers that is approved to haul their load. They've been
That makes
vetted.
sense.
They've been agreed to security protocol. It's not open to the mass market of carriers to move that load.
Do you have like a favorite crazy story that's happened in sort of the cargo crime world?
I have a lot of them.
Well, give us a couple.
We had, I'll give you one from last week. We had a load picked up by a carrier. The load didn't follow the security protocol. It stopped within the first 10 miles. It went to a yard. We also had a light alert that, meaning the door was opened. We had proof that the door had been opened, which it should not have been opened. It should have been sealed and shut and remained that way all the way through destination. It was a contracted full truckload shipment. So we immediately tried calling the driver, tried calling the dispatch operations, contacted the broker, let them know what was happening. We weren't getting any communication with either the driver or the dispatch operations. We investigated this carrier online just through standard, online data tools. Figured out that the owner of this carrier is a name we recognize that's tied to a different criminal group. Just the name, you can figure out who owns that trucking company by online researches, and the name matched to a criminal group that we were aware of. Contacted the shipper, say this is what's happening, and we agreed to go get that load back. So we hired another driver and went and picked up that load from that yard and took it back.
Nice. So what kind of security has to be involved in something like that? Because for the yard owner who may be oblivious to
Yeah.
what's going on, how do you, sort of navigate the intricacies of that kind of operation?
Yeah, we're not calling the shots. We give recommendations. The cargo owner is calling the shots, and it's their product. And they gave the instructions to go pull that load. At the same time, they were communicating to that, or trying to communicate to that carrier, saying you're no longer in charge of this load. We're pulling it back to origin, and that was the end of it.
The drama. I imagine is probably such a rush
Yeah.
when something like that is going on, but not like in a rush, but also kind of panicky. Is there
Yeah.
also a level of like trying to calm down the customer that they're, we're going to
Yeah.
do everything we can?
The customers are, they've been through the ringer,
True.
And, they trust us to do our job. We keep them informed of what's happening, and we provide them recommendations what they should do, and give them ideas for how we should respond. There's other cases where a load was stolen. The entire tractor trailer was stolen. This is Chicago, and it was stolen at night. We had the load. It was declared stolen by the trucking company. We got it pulled over by law enforcement. But the trucking company, when they filed that police report, the officer went on duty and did not enter that police report into the police system. So when the law enforcement, a couple counties away, pulled that truck over, there was no formal record of that truck or trailer being stolen. So they had to let it go. They had no right to, retain that driver. So we were scrambling to get the officer who actually took the police report, I forget who it was, but have he or she go back, enter in that information into the law enforcement database, and declare that truck stolen, which allowed us to then have that truck pulled over down the road further, and that's when we were able to make a recovery because it was formally reported stolen in the police databases.
How often are I guess, the drivers complicit in what's going on, or are they just kind of oblivious to the situation? Or maybe it's case by case.
Case by case, but the vast majority of drivers are not involved.
Hmm.
The kind of the onset of kind of criminal carrier groups operating in certain parts of the country is relatively a new phenomenon. But in my experience, the vast majority of drivers are trying to do a good job and do their job efficiently. But many of them are oblivious to the risks of the load they're pulling.
And then, of
Also,
course, they get caught up.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
And another factor is that most cargo criminals, specifically in North America, will not confront drivers. They're not violent criminal crews. They know that if they don't threaten, assault, or even speak to a driver, that the crime will be classified as a property crime, a theft. But if they do assault or threaten the driver, it'll be classified more as an assault, which gets increased police awareness and response. Property crimes are, in many cases, not high priority for law enforcement compared to assault or somebody being injured, through that activity. So that raises the level of crime, that raises the level of police response. So, and cargo criminals know that. They know that if they don't commit assault, they don't threaten the driver, the likelihood of a quick and police response is less likely.
It sounds almost like a lower risk, higher reward payoff for a lot of these groups.
It is. It is. It is.
Crazy. So earlier this year, Overhaul had made an acquisition, and with that acquisition, Overhaul becomes the largest in-transit supply chain cargo security provider, offering shippers a comprehensive real-time solution for mitigating the risk associated with theft, damage, chain of custody, and other cargo security threats, no matter where the load may be throughout the globe. Now, with this acquisition, can you kind of give us a little bit of a background on why this acquisition was important for Overhaul to make?
Well, we acquired a company that was called SensaGuard. They were a direct competitor of ours in the global market. Many of the founders of Overhaul worked for that same company years ago, so we knew the company, knew the team, knew the operations, and it solidified our position as the leader in this space in terms of market share and revenue. It gave us that boost and ability to position ourselves stronger in the market. We're one of the only global companies that do what we do. We do have competitors around the world, but providing a global solution, we're one of the few that can provide this service globally.
And so with being able to, I guess, provide, sort of the world security, I guess, how are you, monitoring how cargo crime is I'm sure you guys are, of monitoring how it's evolving unique to the country itself? Because you mentioned earlier about how different it is, say from Brazil to Mexico to the United States, but what about relative to, like, I don't know, European countries, or even, like India or, Japan? Like, do they experience a lot of the same cargo crime, I guess, storylines, or are they all vastly different, like Brazil, Mexico, and the United States?
All vastly different.
That's
And
fascinating.
we have a whole intelligence group designed to keep track of that and provide our customers the latest intelligence on what's happening relative to their global supply chain operations. Countries like Japan have very little to no cargo theft. China has very little to no cargo theft. There's other parts of Asia that have high rates of cargo theft. Europe has a relatively high level of cargo theft, but it does vary by country, and the tactics are much different in Europe than they are around the rest of the world. In Europe, if companies can, most cargo theft in Europe happens at unsecured parking areas, rest stops, lay-bys, areas where drivers stop to rest, as they're transiting. And our mode of operating in Europe is if we can get drivers to, when they do stop for long periods of time, for rest or more than an hour, we require them to stop in a secured parking area, with access controls, hopefully some guards, and just some level of security. And that is a very effective tool for mitigating cargo theft in Europe, because drivers are not parking on the side of the road or just a simple rest stop, for their hours of service rest. And that's where the majority of cargo theft happens in Europe, is at these unsecured parking locations.
And so, with the US, with truck parking being such a massive issue for a lot of drivers, are we
Mhm.
seeing that happening to a lot of drivers who stop for a break, or, they can't find anywhere to park, so they're just forced to pull over on the side of the road?
It varies by area of the country.
Hmm.
There's definitely bottlenecks around the country just from a parking standpoint. There's also areas of the country where parking is wide open.
Hmm.
Um, but there is some people in the industry thinking that the market will demand secured parking in the U.S. at some point in the future. Today, the market is not there, and there's very few participants in that space. But there are some companies looking at it and putting up some secured parking, additional truck parking around the country.
And so we've talked a lot about sort of the theft of electronics, like these very costly goods. But there's also protection measures that you guys offer that protects against non-delivery and spoilage. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so some of the challenges and risks we mitigate against are, as I mentioned, temperature. We do monitor for temperature real time. So if the temperature of a specific shipment, whether it be a food or some other temperature sensitive product, goes above a certain level, those thresholds are set by product type and by shipment. So we will get an alert and can notify the appropriate people. Hey, this shipment is increasing its temperature. Let's figure out what action can be taken. Is it getting the truck into a reefer, repair shop? Is it simply telling the driver to turn down the reefer? Things like that can go a long ways to mitigate that exposure to temperature sensitive products. Non-delivery, it does happen often. Many times, shipments are just misdirected, especially at the parcel or LTL level, and being able to quickly identify a shipment is not routing where it's supposed to, or not meeting its waypoints, through the parcel or LTL networks, and be able to alert to that, have plans in place to escalate that to the appropriate person, figure out what's happening. It could be as simple as a pallet was forgotten at a warehouse,
Hmm.
and that may not be noticed for many, many days. And that many, many days, it could expose that pallet to theft. But if we can understand it, respond to that, fix it before it becomes a costly problem, that's our goal.
And so with yeah, I mean, you can't really like read any article right now without reading about like artificial intelligence and ChatGPT and all of that, new technology that's coming into the space. You've mentioned a lot with Overhaul's technology. Are you guys incorporating any kind of, AI? I imagine you are,
Yeah.
from a monitoring standpoint. Curious to hear how you're implementing or plan to implement,
Yeah,
these
no,
types of tools in the
we've
future.
been in the big data, and what we call we use the term machine learning.
Hmm.
We think that's more suitable for our space, and we've been investing in that space for a couple of years now, and building teams around that, and using data to make more accurate predictions, and using data to help mitigate, prevent risks from happening before they become a problem, to identify a risk and be able to address it, correct it before it costs somebody more money.
Hmm.
But we are heavily invested in that space, in using big data and machine learning to make our systems more efficient, make it more accurate, and a better product all around.
So what can folks, I guess, maybe expect, or maybe customers, people who are, interested in becoming a customer, what can they expect from Overhaul, in the coming months or even the coming year?
We're a fast growing company. We're constantly evolving and iterating on our tools, expanding to new markets, incorporating new kind of modes of operating within our control center environment and our monitoring operations. I think we're also going down an area of visibility. Right now we're pretty heavily focused on risk management, but we are moving into the visibility space. And in competing with other players in the visibility space, and providing, in our opinion, a better tool that is a visibility risk management solution set for shippers.
So is there any other, I guess, sort of, the last couple questions here, is there any other aspect to cargo crime or overhaul, or kind of maybe a combination of the two, that you think is important to mention?
Yeah, so we're also incorporating insurance products around our solution.
Hmm.
We have specific insurance programs. We have an InsurTech division. We're seeing that companies, when they do implement our services, um, their rate of loss, their supply chain runs more efficient. It's more optimized, which translates to lower risk across their global supply chain operations. And they should be able to be rewarded or take advantage of that in their insurance programs. So we've set up specific insurance programs with some of the larger underwriters around the world, where if companies do buy into Overhaul solutions, they're eligible to step into an insurance program with a theory that it will cost them less money. And we've seen significant reductions in insurance premiums for our customers under these programs. So they implement a program, they bundle that with an insurance program, and the end result is they're saving money across their operation.
Saving money and saving from, hopefully, potential headaches. All in
Exactly.
one solution. All right,
Mhm.
Ron, this was a fascinating conversation for me. For folks who, are listening to the pod and they want to reach out to you, or they want to reach out to Overhaul and maybe get a demo of the product, where can folks follow more of your work and Overhaul?
Yeah, we're on all the social media accounts. Our website is over-haul, overhaul.com. That's the best place to reach out to us. There's all the different tools to schedule a demo or get in touch. I think that's the easiest way to reach out.
Well, perfect. Great stories today. Thank you for shining a light sort of on these issues that I think they should be more at the forefront, instead of, and on the back burner, when something goes wrong, that's when you're looking for a solution. It's probably the wrong time to be looking for a
Yep.
solution in that regard. So I thank you for your time today and sharing all of those stories.
All
So
right.
thank you
Thank you
again,
very
Ron.
much for the opportunity.
Absolutely.